I'm a police officer in a small town in a southern part of the United States. As a lot of you may have already heard, due to the outbreak of the coronavirus, we are advised to not take any part in self-initiated activities. This includes traffic stops, field interview contacts, as well as the occasional foot patrol. For some of us, this is sort of like a vacation, taking it easy. Myself, though, I'm not enjoying it too much at all. You see, I love self-initiated activity. Anything to stop crime, am I right? But since this corona mess, most of our shifts are spent either driving around the city and patrolling the neighborhoods, which is extremely boring, or sitting in your unit watching Netflix all night. Occasionally, we'll meet up and just shoot the shit. Anything to pass the time. Our calls have been narrowed down as well to calls involving domestic disturbances or anything that involves violence. It sucks for the citizens because we're basically saying that they're shit out of luck when it comes to anything else. I'm not writing this though to complain about the whole situation. No, I'm writing this to send a warning to everyone out there. Stay in your homes at all costs, especially during the night. I just want to point out that I am in no way denying that the coronavirus exists. The virus alone is scary itself. But what I saw last night shook me to the core and leads me to believe that there is something else out there as well. My shift starts at 6 p.m. and it doesn't end until 6 a.m. So, I came in expecting last night to be just like the other nights. While we were briefing with day shift, the day shift sergeant made a statement. Per chief's orders, night shift guys just hang out at the PD. If you get your calls, take them. But chief doesn't want y'all driving around at night until further notice. Every one of us gave each other a puzzled look, and the day shift sergeant made a gesture with his hands as if to tell us, his orders, not mine. Are we allowed to pick up food? One of the guys asked. If you're going to pick up food, do it now while the sun is still out. If I were you guys, I would pick up enough food to last you through the night. I think Chief said that the mayor ordered the gas stations and 24-hour drive-thrus to close down as well. Sergeant stated. It seems like the more the sergeant spoke, the more confused everyone became. Is the mayor allowed to do that and close everything down for the night? Asked a voice from the back. Look, I don't know why they're doing what they're doing, but Chief was pretty adamant about staying at PD. Maybe they're trying to deter people from leaving their homes to enforce the self-quarantine. I don't know. But just do what you have to do and come back before it gets dark, Sergeant said. And so at that, day shift clocked out and we all made our way to our unit so that we could pick up some food and drive around for a bit. We all agreed that we would stay away from the local grocery stores, only because they were still packed with people trying to get whatever groceries they could buy, after all the panic buyers caused a shortage. I went to the local burger joint, Waya Burger, and ordered a couple of burgers from the drive-thru. When I got to the window, I spoke with the cashier and asked her about the night closing. We're not sure why we're closing either, she said in a confused way. I thought you guys would be the one to know. I shook my head. No, they didn't really tell us anything. I kind of wish that they would have told us before we came to work. I could have brought my Switch or something, I said. And with this, the cashier chuckled and handed me over my food. I drove back to the police department and I entered the squad room. Some beautiful bastard went to Walmart and bought an HDMI cable so that we could connect a computer to the TV that we had in there. Johnson logged into his Netflix account, and so began our cop movie marathon for the night. By the time that it had reached 1 a.m., we hadn't received any calls, We spent most of our time continuing to watch movies, bullshitting with dispatch, or making up ridiculous games to keep ourselves entertained. It was at this time that I got the itch to take a drive. I looked over at Herlock and I told him, "Hey, I know that Chief wants us to stay here, but I'm gonna take a drive to clear my head." Herlock gave me a look of disbelief. "You said what?" he exclaimed. "I'm just gonna go cruise for a bit, that's all." I began to walk to the door. The festivities in the room then came to a halt as everyone gave me the same look of disbelief. "You know we're supposed to be staying here, right?" Simpkins said. "Yeah, but I just need to clear my head. I also want to check out and see if everything's closed like the mayor ordered them to," I said. "Hey, if there's a gas station open, could you bring me back a bang? If you get me one, I won't snitch you out," yelled Bigler, who was wrapped in evidence tape like a mummy. "I'll bring you all bangs if you keep your mouth shut," I replied. At this, all the guys made cheerful woos, and then I exited through the door and I got on my unit. Upon leaving the police department, I drove through the main roadways and was surprised to see that everything had in fact closed. Even the lights to all the businesses had been shut off. There's an eerie feeling you get when you see a town become so empty and lifeless. The Circle K gas station looked abandoned, and the beautiful Y to the Whataburger, which was always lit due to the restaurant being open 24/7, was finally without light. I parked and I rolled down the window to see what I could hear, and was surprised that the only things that could be heard was the sound of my engine idling, and the variety of different insects performing their usual symphony. I drove over to the east part of town and conducted a light patrol through the neighborhoods. I didn't expect to find anything out of the ordinary from what I've been seeing these past few nights, but lo and behold, there was a man walking in the middle of the roadway. He was about 3 blocks ahead of me, walking away from me. I began to close the distance between us when I realized that he was a regular one of ours, Connor Peters. Peters wasn't a hard criminal, only a drunk who occasionally would steal beer. Lots of beer. I debated whether I should check out with dispatch, being that they have to know our location in case shit hits the fan and backup needs to be sent. But I decided not to because I was breaking the rules already anyway. As far as I know, there shouldn't really be anyone walking around at this time due to the whole self-quarantine orders. And so, I pulled up next to Connor and I simply asked, "Hey man, what are you doing out so late?" Connor stopped walking and looked at me. "Hey officer, I just wanted some beer and all the freaking gas stations are closed," he said. "Hey, well, I thought I would just let you know that you're not really supposed to be out right now." Connor laughed. "I thought you weren't supposed to be stopping people." "Touché, Connor, touché. I'm just making sure that you're okay. I wouldn't want anything to happen to you, you know. I usually always say this when I stop people on the street." "Frickin' stupid thing this is," Connor said. "I saw a video online where they said that the government is making this whole thing up to test how willing we are to give up our rights." I looked at the invisible camera and gave it to Jim Halpert face. "No one's taking your rights, man. Just go home, man." Suddenly, the sound of a woman screaming came from ahead of us. Connor and I both looked at each other as if to validate if we had both heard the scream. Without thinking, I rolled the window up and I stepped out of my unit. I should have checked out with dispatch at this time, but I didn't. Hey, they always say that hindsight is 20/20. Neither Connor nor I said anything. I began to slowly walk in the direction that the scream came from. "What do you think that was?" Connor asked in a whisper. I didn't answer Connor. I was listening to the silence in case another scream came. Bam! A gunshot came from my right, 2 houses down. "Stay here," I ordered Connor. Connor was in a squat position near the driver door to my unit. I drew my weapon and I called on the microphone onto my handheld radio. "PD, I have a gunshot coming from the 700 block of Houston Street." I made my way closer to the house, using the darkness and nearby parked cars as cover since I didn't know what the threat exactly was. When I was approximately 30 feet from the house, the sound of glass breaking caused me to take cover behind a nearby tree. I looked at the house and discovered the source of the glass breaking. The figure had either been thrown through the window or voluntarily jumped through it. The figure laid on the ground, almost motionless. Because of the soft moans of pain coming from the figure, my brain registered that it was a woman. Suddenly, another figure jumped out of the window and onto the woman on the ground. It was at this time that I pointed my weapon at them and I turned on the flashlight attachment to my gun. I saw everything clearly then. A pale woman with dark hair and eyes the color of night was on top of another woman who looked at me helplessly. The pale woman wore a black dress that covered her arms, save for her hands. Her hands were just as pale as her face, and I noticed that protruding from her fingers were these long, yellow claws that looked as if they could pierce metal. The disturbing feature about this woman, though, was her mouth. Her mouth was covered in blood, with sharp teeth protruding from her gums. A hiss came from the pale woman as she began to wrap her clawed hands around the other woman's neck. The woman on the ground let out a choked scream. The pale woman then looked me in the eye, said something in a language that I didn't know, and bit into the neck of the woman on the ground. The woman tried to scream, but she was only able to make gurgling noises. A million things were running through my mind. I had already had my gun drawn and pointed at the pale woman. Do I go less lethal? Do I go hands-on and try to pull the pale woman off? Do I shoot? All these thoughts sped through my brain at 100 miles an hour. If I didn't do something quick, the pale woman could possibly end the other woman's life, or better yet, attack me next. It was then that I decided to shoot. For those of you who have never shot another living being before, there's always this moment where you shoot your weapon, and you can feel a surge of adrenaline hit your heart. It causes you to go cold for a second, and then you're hit with the shock that you didn't actually shoot your weapon. You realize that while your brain may have pulled the trigger, your body didn't respond, and you're left standing there frozen. That's exactly what happened to me in that moment. I heard slurping sounds coming from the pale woman. Her mouth was glued to the other woman's neck. The woman on the ground stopped struggling and making any noises. She was gone. Once the realization of that hit me, I was able to pull the trigger to my weapon and hit the pale woman on the top of her head. She immediately began to shriek in pain. The sound of her shrieks pierced my ears and caused me to wince. The pale woman continued to shriek and flew into the air faster than anything I had ever seen. I found myself repeating, "Oh shit," over and over as I stood there, not believing what I had seen. The sound of Connor screaming from behind me broke me out of my trance. I turned in Connor's direction and I saw Connor being held by the neck by a tall pale man, dressed in black, similar to the pale woman. The pale man looked at me with these same black eyes and shouted something in that same language. Connor continued to struggle and kick the man in the abdomen area. The pale man turned to Connor and he crushed his neck, causing Connor to go limp. The pale man then smiled at me, displaying his razor-like teeth, and spoke again in that unknown language. He then flew into the sky with Connor in his arms, just as the pale woman had. I ran over to the spot where they last stood, and I stared up into the sky dumbfounded. I reached for my radio and I called out, "PD, status on backup." No reply. Again, I called out, "PD, status on backup." Nothing. And that's when I discovered that I had forgotten to turn on my radio when I had exited my unit earlier. No one heard me. No one would have known where I was. It's kind of funny when I think about it now, but at that time, it felt like a rock had hit me in the stomach. That feeling got worse when I turned to the spot where the woman on the ground was laying, only to find that she wasn't there anymore. Porch lights began to turn on as neighbors began to wake up, probably to discover the source of the commotion. I then did the most unpoliced thing a police officer could do. I got into my unit and I drove off. I don't know why I did it. I felt like I was on autopilot. I drove past the police department, past the city limits, and just continued to drive. I don't know where I was planning to go, what I would do if I got there, or how I was going to explain my actions. I'm pretty sure that there's a bolo out for me right now. State troopers are probably looking as well as other agencies. What happens when I'm caught? I have so many questions and no answers. I can't help but feel like my chief may have known something about this. It's probably why we were ordered not to leave the police department. I should have just listened. But now here I am, writing this up so I can post it online as a warning. I hope that whoever reads this takes it seriously and listens to me when I say stay inside. Don't go out at night. Fortify your house any way you can. If you hear knocking at your door or windows in the late hours of the night, ignore it. There's something out there other than a virus that's more dangerous. Something that I can't explain. It's out there, and it's hungry.